June 22, 1994, the World Cup in the United States. A Colombian defender slides to block a cross and accidentally turns the ball into his own net. It's a mistake, the kind that happens in football all the time. But this one would help knock one of the tournament's favorites out of the World Cup. 10 days later, that defender would be dead, shot multiple times in a parking lot in his hometown. And according to witnesses, with each shot fired, the killer shouted one word: goal. This is the story of Andrés Escobar, the gentleman of football, and one of the darkest chapters the sport has ever known. To understand the tragedy, you first have to understand the dream. In the early 1990s, Colombian football was on top of the world. Between 1991 and 1993, the national team won an astonishing 25 of 26 matches. They didn't just beat the giants of South America, they humiliated them, including a stunning 5-0 demolition of Argentina. In Argentina, they were led by unforgettable characters, the playmaker Carlos Valderrama, with his explosion of blonde curls, and the electric forward Faustino Asprilla. They played a beautiful, flowing brand of football that thrilled the world. Expectations soared. The legendary Pelé himself picked Colombia as a favorite to win the 1994 World Cup, and at the heart of the defense stood a calm, elegant young man, Andrés Escobar. Composed, dignified, and respected by everyone, they called him El Caballero del Fútbol, the gentleman of football. But beneath the beautiful football, something dark was woven through the Colombian game. In the Colombia of that era, football and the drug trade had become dangerously intertwined. This was the height of the cartel years. Cocaine money flowed into the country's football clubs, with powerful traffickers using teams to launder money and buy prestige. Reports from the time suggest that more than half the national squad played for clubs financially backed by narco-traffickers. It meant that football matches weren't just sport. Enormous illegal bets rode on the results, placed by some of the most dangerous men in the country. And when powerful, violent people gamble huge sums on a game, losing becomes a very perilous thing. The players knew the stakes were about more than football, and as the World Cup approached, that pressure would turn into something terrifying. Colombia arrived at the 1994 World Cup, carrying the weight of a nation's enormous expectations, and almost immediately, it fell apart. In their opening match, they were beaten 3-1 by Romania, a shocking result. And then the threats began. One of the midfielders received a death threat by fax. The pressure on the team became suffocating. The coach reportedly even considered resigning. There were reports of menacing messages dictating who could and couldn't play. This was no longer a football team, simply trying to win. This was a group of young men playing under a shadow of fear, knowing that powerful and dangerous people back home were furious and watching. Now they faced the host nation, the United States, on June 22nd. After losing their opener, it was effectively must-win. Lose, and they would almost certainly be eliminated. In the 34th minute, a US player sent a low cross into the Colombian penalty area. Andrés Escobar did exactly what a defender is trained to do. He stretched out his leg to cut out the cross, to stop it from reaching an attacker. But the ball deflected off his outstretched foot and rolled past his own goalkeeper, Oscar Cordoba, and into the Colombian net, an own goal. The United States went on to win the match 2-1, and with that defeat, Colombia, the team Pelé had tipped to win it all, was eliminated in the first round, one of the great humiliations in the country's sporting history. Escobar was devastated, but he handled it the way he handled everything, with grace. He didn't hide. After the team came home, he even wrote a newspaper column, urging his countrymen not to lose heart. He ended it with words that would become unbearably haunting. Life doesn't end here. We have to go on. 5 days after writing those words, his life would end. On the night of July 2nd, 1994, Andrés Escobar made his first real public appearance since returning home. He went out with friends to a nightclub in Medellín. Medellín at that time was one of the most dangerous cities on earth, a place with a staggering murder rate, controlled in many ways by the drug trade. At the club, Escobar was reportedly confronted by a group of men. Among them were brothers connected to the world of drug trafficking and illegal gambling, men who, it's widely believed, had lost a great deal of money betting on Colombia. They began taunting him about the own goal. Ever the gentleman, Escobar tried to defuse the situation. He left walking toward his car in the parking lot, but the confrontation followed him. In the parking area, a man named Humberto Castro Muñoz, a driver and enforcer linked to the brothers, pulled out a gun and shot Escobar 6 times. And according to eyewitnesses, with each shot the gunman shouted, "Goal, goal," mocking, echoing the commentator who had called his own goal days before. Andrés Escobar was rushed to the hospital. About an hour later, He was pronounced dead. He was 27 years old. The killing stunned the world and shattered Colombia. An estimated 120,000 people poured into the streets of Medellín for his funeral. The grief was overwhelming, not just for a footballer, but for what he represented: decency, dignity, a better version of the country. Gunned down in a parking lot. The prosecutor who investigated the case later said that everyone, from the president to the poorest citizen, wanted the crime solved, that people might have torn the suspects apart if given the chance. The gunman, Humberto Castro Muñoz, confessed the very next day. He was convicted and sentenced to 43 years in prison, but here is where the story curdles into something even more bitter. He served only about 11 years before being released for good behavior. And the powerful brothers believed to have been behind the confrontation that night largely escaped accountability for Escobar's death. For decades, it felt like justice had never truly been done. The story of Andrés Escobar refuses to fade. And even now, it keeps evolving. Over the years, historians and investigators have stressed that the truth is more complicated than the simple, brutal headline of murdered for an own goal. His death was tangled up in Colombia's wider nightmare: the cartels, the gambling, the violence that soaked the era. The own goal may have been a trigger, or simply an excuse. The full motive has never been completely settled, and the case is, remarkably, still in the news. In early 2026, one of the brothers long linked to that night, Santiago Galón, was reportedly shot and killed in Mexico, more than 3 decades after Escobar's death. The Colombian president himself publicly tied the man to the killing that, in his words, damaged the country's image around the world. But the most important legacy isn't about the killers. It's about the man himself. Today, Andrés Escobar is not remembered for a deflection off his foot on a summer night in Pasadena. He's remembered for his dignity, his sportsmanship, his humanity. The gentleman of football. Andrés Escobar's death became a symbol of a moment when football, crime, and a country's pain collided with devastating force. A reminder that, in the wrong time and the wrong place, a simple mistake in a game can be twisted into something monstrous. But it's also a reminder of who he was. A man who, even after the worst night of his career, told his country, life doesn't end here. We have to go on. He never got to. But more than 30 years later, the world still says his name, and not the own goal, him. Thanks for watching. Take a moment to remember Andrés Escobar, the gentleman of football,